Oh, yeah. And now the meeting's being recorded, and this recording will be made available for y'all. But yeah, I think we still have some people coming in. But anyway, that's me. We're gonna have a Q&A at the end. So yeah, I'll just pass it on to the next organizer.
For the sake of not just sitting here and staring at each other for a minute, and I'll just go ahead. My name is Jeremy. Hello, everyone. I am a member of the Minorities and Philosophy group, which we'll talk about when we get to Q&A, but we're awesome and invite you to, come, explore some philosophy that isn't just old white guys, or to find a place that, is comfortable and safe, if you're not an old white guy. So that group's really wonderful, and part of something that we were kind of trying to set up over the course of the last year were some resources that were transfers did not have last year. So at some point, Janet, I think, started asking me, like, what do you wish that we had given you over the summer? And we were like, I wish I'd had some stuff on, like, how to transition to the reading load and the reading style, and how to, get some of these writing resources, like, the week before my first 4 papers are due, and, all of these kinds of things. And so this workshop kind of came together because I very, very luckily got to meet, some of our graduate students like Ravit and Jenny, who just kind of like blew my mind with like all these different skills and techniques and ways that you could just read more deeply, but also like more efficiently, which is helpful when it's like, I have 300 pages of reading this week, and I'm not going to do it all close reading. It's just impossible. So yeah, that's hopefully this workshop is something that is going to help you take a breath and relax and not panic, and find some ways to engage with the text that you're reading that is both more fruitful, and that you can take and play with and make your own and add things to, and that hopefully is going to take a little bit off your plate as far as scheduling and trying to cope with the workload and everything, especially when we're all stressed out. So that's it for me. I'll see you later.
Howdy, y'all. I'm Jonah. I am a recent alumnus. I just graduated in the class of 2020. I'm also a peer tutor and a former big personality in MAP. Some of you have probably read my name in some of the resources that have been sent out. I think the big thing about reading for me, we're all going to talk more later, not to be the third person in a row to say that, but, when I came in my first semester, I was very accustomed to not having to do the reading and being able to get an A on the paper at community college. And the readings were super intimidating and super overwhelming, especially with what I was interested in, which was mainly historical texts. And I think the big pivot in learning how to read and developing my own system and my own pace and all of that, it took me from my first semester not doing any of the readings, literally not doing any, and like trying to make do, to my last semester taking graduate seminars and keeping up with the pace of grad students getting those readings done. And I'm still improving it. I'm still innovating kind of how I read and getting input from others. And I guess my point being, like, this can truly be like a journey for you. You don't have to be a perfect, expertly fast reader after this workshop is over, this moment forward. Like, relax into the process. You're going to be fine.
So yeah, I'll introduce myself next. Howdy, everybody. I'm Leo. I'm a senior transfer in the philosophy program, finishing up the logic minor this semester, as well as the major. And yeah, I'm definitely a slow reader as well. definitely a slow reader. I have no idea how many pages per minute. I honestly have never really kept track, but a phenomenon that I'm very like intimately familiar with is reading something and then thinking to myself, I totally did not pay attention to what was going on and having to go back. And, so I'm definitely not, how to put this, like, I haven't learned, all the tricks or techniques. So really, I'm hoping to learn something with everybody in this workshop. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead. So hi, I'm Jenny. I'm a graduate student here in the philosophy department. Later on, we're going to be talking about specifically, or I'm going to be talking about specifically some reading tips and tricks for historical philosophical texts. Just a little bit about me. I study Kant mainly, so I'm reading historical texts very often. I also taught 25B over the summer. Again, that's one of our introductory history classes along with 25A. And yeah, I'm really excited to chat with you all and to read a little philosophy and also some historical philosophy.
I think I'm the last one. My name is Ravit. I am also a graduate student, although I'm not GSIing anything this semester. Yeah, I'm going to be talking with you about reading contemporary texts, which is what I mostly do. So I'm mostly working in epistemology and philosophy of science. And I'm also a member of MAP, Minorities and Philosophy. And yeah, MAP is, let me plug it in. MAP is a group of philosophers in our department, undergraduates and graduate students. So it's for minority students and allies who want to work on inclusivity and diversity. And I'm going to put our email in the chat. So if you want to be added to our mailing list, just email that. And I'll say a little bit more about reading later on.
Well, I guess I'll just hop into a brief, just kind of thing is, so we kind of have just three announcements in order of importance. The first is that we expect you all to participate and to participate well. And to specify what well means here is, if you are a person who tends not to talk very much, I would like you to try to talk more, much more than you're comfortable with. If you are a person who tends to talk a lot, I might even encourage you to time yourself to not dominate the conversation, and really leave room for everyone who you're going to be working with in your breakout groups. The second is to be respectful. You are going to be talking with one another about about difficult texts in a difficult way, having just done difficult reading, and it's vitally important that you respect one another, to not shoot down one another's ideas, to only be supportive, mutually supportive in this process of learning how to read better, not necessarily to be masterful thinkers. The final one is to only say things, only do things that produce an environment of safety. If at any time anyone here makes you feel unsafe, does anything or says anything which for whatever reason makes you feel unsafe, please, please, please reach out to me. If you're not comfortable reaching out to me, reach out to any of the 6 people who introduced yourselves at the beginning. You will be taken care of. So with those out of the way, it's actually going to be Ravit who is going to give us our first bit about reading.
Okay, yeah. So again, I'm Ravit, a graduate student. Before I get to reading, let me just quickly say what you can expect today. So basically, there are going to be 3 sections to this workshop. I'm going to get us started by giving you some tips on how to read contemporary philosophy. Then you're going to go into breakout rooms. We're going to give you, I put a link, a Dropbox link in the chat. So if you want to go there while I'm kind of introducing and download all the files, because these are the things that you're going to need for this workshop. So yeah, I'm just making sure it has everything you need. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to be talking for 10 minutes, just giving some basic tips about reading. Then you're going to go into breakout rooms. We're going to give you a text. You're going to read it, trying to implement some of the things or trying out your own things. Then we're going to go into breakout rooms and you're going to talk about your experience. Then we're going to do basically the same thing, but for a history text. So Jenny is going to lead us. Same thing. She's going to be giving some advice. Then you're going to be reading a text on your own. Then it's going to be breakout rooms to talk about them. And after that, we're going to have a Q&A session. So our initial intention was to start the Q&A at 7:30. I hope we're going to get to that point. You know how things are. We're going to try our best. So, okay, I hope you had enough time to download the files that I put in the Dropbox chat. If not, that's no big deal. What I do want to get us started doing is just going over some of the tips. So one of the files that I put in the Dropbox folder is a handout called Revit Handout. So I'm going to go over it now, and I'm going to share my screen so you can be on the same page with me, quite literally. So let me just share my screen, and you can also just go over it yourself. Okay, can I get an indication that my screen has been shared? Okay, thank you. So, yeah, I'm going to try to keep it like 10 minutes. So that's what you should be expecting. So, yeah, I want to be talking about one specific skill, how to read for the main argument in a text. If you're going to be taking one thing from my 10 minutes, please let it be this. Reading is a skill you can improve. And the reason I'm saying it is because of my background and my starting point in philosophy. So I think for the first, few years, definitely all through the time that I was doing undergrad classes, I was really scared of reading any text, doesn't matter which. I was just really scared. I thought I was bad at reading. I thought I was just like a slow reader. It's something wrong with me. I guess I'm not that great of a philosopher. And I never talked about it with anyone because I felt ashamed. I felt like, okay, I guess sucks to be me. I'm just gonna be reading slowly over here. So, you know, it's a very natural thing to feel. But the point is, don't let it stop you, because it's actually just like a wrong frame of mind. Because reading is a skill, and it is something that you can learn to be better and you can improve. And I think for me, all I needed was just to kind of find my way. And the main thing I want to encourage you today is to be reflective about your reading strategies and just find what works for you. I do not know what that thing is. All I can do is tell you what works for me. And, you know, maybe some of it will be helpful for you, or maybe it will just inspire you to find the things that are good for you. But that's kind of, it took me years of fail attempts to find the thing that works for me. And I think it really helped me when I was at a workshop that had a similar component to the thing that we're going to be doing today. So I'm kind of hoping that that's going to be helpful. So that's my beginning spiel. So yeah, here's kind of how I'm thinking about reading. Sorry, like I wanted to say that there are many ways to read a text, and many things, it really depends on what you want to do with the text. So what I'm going to talk about today is not like the only way to read. I just want to kind of alert you to one thing you could be doing with a text when you decide that this is the thing that you want to be doing. And again, many ways to do that as well. But the thing I want to be talking about is, what do you do when what you want to do with the text is just find the main argument. If you just want to be focusing on that, if you just want to kind of extract that from the text, like what do you do if that's your aim, which it's not always going to be your aim. It's not going to be appropriate for every text, but suppose this is what you want to do. What is one way to go about it? So it's kind of a cliche, but I think it's true. Like the main thing is that you need to constantly be asking yourself, what is the main point here? Like there's a thing that the author wants to say. They wrote this paper for a reason. What is this reason? Like what is the thing they want to tell me? And in a way it sounds like, such a basic thing, but actually it's pretty difficult to like understand what is the thing that the author wants to say. And the second question that you need to constantly ask yourself is, what is supposed to convince me of that main point? What is the author saying and what is supposed to convince me? I think to me, I initially thought, these are like such basic things. It should be like so obvious, but it's not. So this is the kind of question that always have it in your mind as you are reading the text. So that's step one. Orient yourself to extracting the main argument. Step two, what do you actually read? I think when I started reading philosophy, I thought I had a STEM background and I was reading it as if it's like a mathematical proof. I thought I had to read like all the words carefully in the order that they are given to me. And, I have to fully understand paragraph 1 if I have like any hope of understanding paragraph 2. So I would get like stuck on things and I would never move on and it would take me forever. And by the end of it, I would either get discouraged and not finish or like not get it because I was too much in the weeds. So I want to offer a different way to do it. What I do now, I read closely when I want to be extracting the main argument. I only read closely the parts that are going to help me answer the questions that I mentioned before. What is the main point? What are the reasons that are supposed to convince me of that point? I'm going to be reading the text, searching for those things that are going to answer those questions for me. And I'm going to be skimming or skipping everything else. It's going to help me to see the forest instead of the woods. Again, I can go back later and do something else with the text. But when I want to extract the main argument, this is what I'm going to do. So now the tricky question is like, how do you know in advance, like before you even read the sentence, whether it's going to help you ask your big question, answer your big questions? That's the $1 million question. That's exactly the thing that you're going to improve on as you work on your skill. But that's the thing you want to aspire to. And so to do that, I can just share the things that I do out of reflection. You may be doing different things, but for me, it's really helping if I pay really close attention to expressions that indicate the structure of the text. So sometimes these are words that are called signposting words. For example, I shall argue that, when an author uses that expression immediately, like all ears, well, what is the thing you're going to argue for? And I'm going to highlight it also. Or, the author might say, here's an example, but maybe I don't need an example right now because I got that point that the example is trying to illustrate. Then I'm going to skim that part, or even I'm going to skip it. And it might be that the discussion of the example is 2 pages. It's fine. I don't really need it. Using my judgment, this is an example I don't need. I'm just going to like skim it until I get to the end of the example. And then I'm going to reassess, okay, what is the new thing that is going on in the text? Like, do I need this to know what the main point is and what is supposed to convince me of that point? So yeah, use your judgment. And so you might have this worry, like, what if I skip something that's actually important? That's fine. It happens to me all the time. Don't expect yourself to like, you're trying your best, but like, yeah, you're trying to read, you're trying to like determine in advance if something's going to be relevant. It's a guess game. So, but it's fine because if you miss something that is important, you will find out later in the paper that you missed something and you'll go back. So this is something that I often do. I'll read for a bit and like, wait a minute, I missed a thing. Okay, I'll go back to the thing that I skipped. That example that I skipped was actually important because the author keeps coming back to it. So I'll go back to it now and I'll read it more closely. So I make those decisions in my mind all the time. Ask yourself, what is important? what is not. Decide what you want to focus on and what you want to focus less on as you read. So that was my second point. My third point is about the kind of activities that I do while I'm reading the text. So the way I'm thinking about reading is kind of analogous to the way I'm thinking about listening to a lecture. When I listen to a lecture, I have to take notes. I have to do it. Otherwise, I lose focus. I need to do some kind of process. I need to process it in my mind in some way to make sure I don't drift away, and to make sure I am digesting the ideas that are given to me. If I am just like listening passively to a talk or just like reading words out of a page, I will drift. I will not retain any of the things that are said to me. So figure out which kind of activities you need to do to be able to keep track of the text. So I can tell you the things that I do that help me. One is that I annotate, I guess like for me, like the big thing, I'm gonna annotate the text. So it could be highlights for you, it could be underlines, it could be anything. Personally, for me, I do two things. One, I highlight with different colors. So I'm gonna show you the different colors that I use below. And the thing, well, actually, I'll do it now. Yeah, so you see I have a list of colors. So yellow is the words that I read just to follow the paper. Orange is something really important. Green is for signposting. Purple is for like example, analogy, whatever, anything that illustrates an idea. Blue is for a definition, and pink is for something that I want to read more about later. And the reason I have this color scheme, again, it keeps me on my toes. Every sentence that I'm highlighting, I need to think, why am I highlighting this? What is this sentence doing here? So I'm not gonna be just like passively, ending with like, it's just like everything in yellow, just like the highlight of the page. And moreover, I'm not gonna necessarily highlight whole sentences. Within each sentence, I'm going to be discerning. Like, I don't need all like the unnecessary verbiage. I just like don't need that. What I need is just those words that matter to answer my questions. What is the author trying to say to me? What are the reasons I'm supposed to be convinced of that thing? I'll show you an example of what it looks like in a minute. But that's one thing I do. Another thing I do, I have symbols that I completely made up. Here are my symbols. You can take them or make up your own symbols. Instead of writing next to paragraph things, when I start to write things, it distracts me. Like I need to keep my focus on the paper. So I might just like draw a heart if there's like an idea I like, or if there's an objection, I'll make a note of it, or like a response to an objection or anything else. After I'm done reading, you see my paper is annotated. It's going to be super, super easy to go back to those ideas that I want to revisit and read more closely. Now I have like a map of my paper. I'm taking a bit longer. I'll try to keep it short. Yeah, so back to so I do those things so I can keep track of the paper. Again, everything that I do, everything that I'm annotating is going to go back to my main questions, like what is this paper even doing? Like what's the point? And the last step, which is the most important step for me, after I finish reading, I must write a short summary of the text. I must do it. Otherwise, I'm not going to remember anything. It's when I write the summary, that's when I'm going to start to understand. Like for me, again, this is just reflection. I don't, for you, it might be different. But for me, that's when I'm going to start understanding like what just happened, put the points together, realize, oh, actually, there's a missing link. I'll go back. Can I find it? No? Okay, then maybe I have an objection to the paper. It doesn't need to be long. Usually for me, it's just going to be a paragraph. And I'm trying to just say, again, what is the point of the text? What is supposed to convince me of those things? Does not need to be 100% accurate. Do not be hard on yourself. It's okay. Just try your best. It is also helpful if you want to write down a few questions you have. Again, it's going to help your process. Also, it's going to help you participate because then you can ask about those things, either in your lecture or in your section or in your office hour. Maybe it's going to be the basis of your paper at the end. So that's really helpful. And another thing, when I write my summary, I try to do it without looking at the paper because I want to do the processing part. But sometimes I'll go back to the paper if I don't remember something, or after I write my summary, then I go back to the paper. So just before I finish, I want to show you this annotation thing and how it looks like. So I actually have an annotated version of this very document, which I am now opening. And then I'm going to finish in like 2 minutes. Okay, so this is an annotated version of the same handout. So see, I'm using my colors. I didn't have purple here, so I just use gray. Usually I use a different software. So look at what's going on here. If you only take one thing from today, this is green, because here I am kind of conveying to you. It's like I'm saying, here's what I'm going to say. Like, microphone, I'm saying this. So the reader knows, paying attention. This is where the author is going to say something to me. Reading is a skill you can improve. Like, in my first year, in my first few years in philosophy, as the reader, I'm like, whatever, useless verbiage, skip, Then I get to, today, okay, this is signposting. This is the author telling me, okay, now I'm going to announce to you what my point is going to be. So I'll put it in green to make sure I notice. And then I'm saying, I'm not going to highlight like all of this sentence even. I'm just going to say today, I'm going to be talking about it's about reading the main argument and what works for me. So you see, because I only highlighted like a part of my sentence, like it's super easy to look at it. You don't need to even like read the whole thing. It's enough, today, reading for the main argument what works for me. So you see, it's kind of easy to go over when I read it. It helps me to not focus like on all of the words. I don't need all of the words really to understand the sentence. Like the ones that I've highlighted are enough for me. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to continue to go over this. You will have access for it later, along with all of the other things, so you can go over it. But that's kind of the thing. So I'm just like showing you all the colors. At the end, you have an example of just like a text I highlighted. Again, what I wanted to draw attention to is usage of different colors, the symbols if you want, that you don't have to highlight the whole sentence. So you can get a chance to look at it later. So this is what I had to say about this. What we want you to do now is kind of take some time to experiment with reading techniques yourselves. You can, if you want, use some of the things that I talked about, or you can try anything else you want. We're going to give you time. We're going to give you 15 minutes. So we're going to take time to read a paper that you can find in the Dropbox folder. So let me just put the link again in case new people joined.
Actually, sorry to interrupt you. I think, were we still planning to have everyone do breakout groups and just talk a little bit about like the reading strategies right now?
Oh, sorry. I thought we were doing that after. Whatever you say is the thing to do, we should do.
Actually, that probably makes more sense. Yeah. Okay, cool. So yeah, sorry, continue. Reading demo.
Okay, yeah, so if you go to the Dropbox folder, you'll find a paper by a person named Daniel Dennett, who's a famous philosopher. This is a very short paper. It's a 3-page paper. The point, so we're gonna give you 15 minutes. It will probably not be enough time to read it, but that is the reason why we are assigning a short period of time. It is to prevent you from getting into the weeds because you know you don't have enough time. So we wanna be able to give yourself an opportunity to show yourselves that you can read in this different style and how much you can actually get out of the text. And so the idea is do the best you can, read for the main text, for the main argument. Do not worry about the details. It is okay and expected that you will not understand all of the details. After we give you time to read it yourselves, we're going to give you time to talk about the text with other people. And so the idea is, like for me, I couldn't believe I could actually read like this and understand the text. But when I talk about it with other people, then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I guess I did get something intelligible out of this. So we're going to encourage you to take this kind of line of thinking, talk about it with others, and kind of see where things go. Also, after the workshop in the folder, if you want to sign up to get information later, I have like highlighted, I've read it in my style with my highlights and my symbols, and you can take a look at how this very text looks like. So I took way more time than I intended. But yeah, so I'm going to give it up to whoever is doing the sharing, which is either Paul or Leo.
Yeah, no, that was really great, Ravi. Thank you so much. And I know some people have class at 6:30, so yeah, again, it'll be recorded. If you need to leave, just that's fine. But yeah, so I'm actually extremely technologically deficient. Would one of the other organizers be able to split people into breakout rooms, and then, or I guess, I mean, we can do that as you read. But yeah, please find the Daniel Dennett reading. It's only a few pages, and take 10 minutes to read it. I'm going to start now. And then we're going to be splitting you into breakout groups. All right, we have about 5 more minutes. But yeah, please try to read intentionally, seek the main argument, and yeah, we'll talk about this soon. Okay, so that's 10 minutes. It's okay if you didn't get a chance to read through it all super thoroughly. We're not gonna, grade you on this. But yeah, could I maybe have Ravi split everyone into groups now and then talk a little bit about, well, so I guess, we're going to split you up into groups, and we want you to, keeping in mind like how you're reading, focus on trying to say what the argument is in the text. Try to point out like what point the author is trying to make. Think about an insight that you had when reflecting on the main argument, and try to come together as a group and have one question that you have about the text. So we're going to give you about 10 minutes to talk about this.
Yeah, okay, so I'm going to be splitting you to breakout rooms. Please remember the things that Jonah said at the beginning. If at any point you feel uncomfortable for any reason, you can leave and come back to the main room. You can text any one of us. We do expect you to participate in the breakout rooms, even though it might be challenging. I know for me it is challenging. But yeah, do your best to participate. If you're the kind of person who is inclined to not participate, do your best to keep yourself in check. If you're the kind of person who tends to over participate, and do your best to kind of invite others in. So I'm going to be sending us to breakout rooms of about 4 people per room. It's going to send us hosts in too. So I'm just going to ask all hosts to leave the rooms and come back to the main room when it does that. Yes. So anyone wants to say anything, or should I just like do that?
Let's just send them away.
Okay. 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 So. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so rooms are happening. Oops. Rooms are not happening. Give me a second.
No worries.
While Ravit's setting that up, I just want to say a couple things about once you get into the room. I know things are always a little awkward when you're just like randomly put into rooms with people, and like some people have their cameras on, some people have their cameras off, and trying to figure out whatever. And so like if you need an icebreaker, like whoever woke up earliest this morning, you know, kind of can talk first or introduce themselves very briefly. Maybe just like your name and like what your favorite breakfast food is or something. And then try to get, you know, right into maybe like a little bit of reflection on how the reading went. And maybe as a group, try to come up with an interesting, you know, a question you think is interesting about the text or something you didn't understand or something like that, right? That, you know, might make the conversation about the text a little bit easier after we get out of breakout rooms.
Okay, I'm ready to actually create the rooms. So there we go. Well, hello.
Cool. Oh, I should set my timer.
Yeah, this is taking longer than expected, as expected.
I mean, we are being recorded, so I will simply say,
Yeah.
I saw 10 minutes next to Beat's name, and I raised my eyebrow. Just that, like, everything, like, I looked at all the documents, and it's like, oh, we're going to take longer to go through all of this. This is like, no way we're going through everything in 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's not happening. I caught the tail end of that, and like that's very true. I sent you my handout. It doesn't matter if it's not in the Dropbox. I don't think.
I put it there. Yeah.
Oh, you did. Okay. And then the AMO thing. I was just gonna go through a highlighted version of the PDF that I have, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I hope, and then I could like send that highlighted version out. I'm highlighting
That's
it
good.
now as we speak. But it's based on my notes that I had done before, so it's very easy. So
Okay.
yeah. Okay, cool.
So how are we gonna, I guess, do this? Should we maybe cut down on some of the breakout room time? Because I don't know. Or like maybe cut down on the whole group discussion, like maybe just have people say a couple of points.
I mean, I could be convinced otherwise. I kind of liked how Ravit did things just now, which was kind of going through, like having the handout for them to refer to back later if they wanted to, but not going through every point of the handout. And then, because I think the discussion might be some of the more useful parts. Like, I mean, maybe people won't ask questions, but I like the idea of having the discussion be. But I don't know. I might try to go through my handout quickly. For that reason.
Yeah, I mean, we cut out 10 minutes from the schedule, which it's like left room for Ravi to do her thing.
Yeah.
And it was like, frankly, better, I think, than what we had scheduled. And yeah, I think if based on the attrition rate of the participants, we're gonna have more than enough time for Q&A, because I doubt that there's going to be a excess of 60, 70 questions.
Yeah. I think we should give them the opportunity to ask all the questions they want to ask if they're here. But I can always talk forever, so I don't mind doing that either. I don't know.
Well, we started this breakout room at 7 on the dot. The Q&A we can sort of push back. I don't want to rush your discussion. I think it's, yeah, like Ravit's thing was really helpful. I'm sure your thing is going to be really helpful. But yeah, it'd also be good to have them discuss. So, okay.
I think we're like kind of on track a little bit, or am I don't know.
Yeah, we should be on, well, let's see.
Oh, are we ending at 7:30 and not 8? I thought we were ending at 8. If we're ending at 8, we're like easily on track. If we're ending at 7:30, it's like more.
No, we're ending at 8.
Okay, all right.
So let's see, the whole discussion is going to be starting at 7:10.
Am I still a co-host of this? Because my internet was I had to switch rooms because my internet was spotty. And so I might not be. And so I want to just, can I share my screen right now?
Yeah. You should be able to do it.
Yeah, you're a co-host.
Okay, so here's this to be highlighted. I'm doing things in different colors, not using Ravit's method, but just to highlight that there's like 3 separate arguments here.
That's cool.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking I'm gonna have them go to, so this will be highlighted in blue to match this and this, etc. I'll do that when we're in Q&A quickly.
Cool, very cool.
But then I was thinking of having them just read to, I mean, I'll say this, I guess, but I'll have them read until, I think, exposition. So it's actually pretty short, but I don't know. It might be readable in the time given, but I think that's fine. Have them read up to exposition 2. So stop at exposition 2 is what I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, Jenny, that's the thing. You and I know historical texts can be read that fast, but it's like...
It might take a long time. This would actually take me a very long time. So...
No, but what I mean is like the first time I picked up any historical text, I was like, I will get through this one paragraph in 15 minutes.
Right. Yeah. True. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. But as long as this seems not too short, even just the look of it isn't too short.
You're thinking through proof 2 or through exposition 2?
Through exposition 2. So they definitely should read through proof 2. His labels of the proofs are not the most helpful from my perspective. So that'll be an obstacle they have to overcome.
Oh wait, Jenny, quick question. For the breakout rooms, what questions are you going to ask them to focus on?
Oh, I think I'll ask them to try to identify. So I think sorry, I sent the handout like literally right before this started, so I'm sure no one has looked at it. But the main kind of like skill or thing that I want them to focus on is looking out for when a technical term is being introduced. So if we might think by the word like communication, which is one of Amos, or like by idea, or all these like familiar words that they're kind of using it in a familiar way. But actually, you should be on the lookout for where they're kind of introducing definitions of terms that they want to be using in a specific way within their system. That's something that I think it's not totally specific to historical texts, but I think it happens a lot in historical texts. So I think it's one of the main stumbling blocks maybe for understanding what's going on. So I was going to introduce this skill, and then I was going to ask, are any technical definitions being introduced? Or if there are technical definitions, like what are they? It's not that you have to understand exactly what it means, but where in the text maybe could you spot those, where those were being introduced? I'll do a similar thing with like a little Descartes passage if we have time. I don't know if we really do, but I might go there, I'm not sure. That's on the handout that I have anyway. And then I was going to also ask if they could identify the conclusion of the argument or arguments in the passages that they read, and then also could they locate the arguments themselves? Those were the three things I was thinking of asking them. But even if they just did the first thing, that would be good. The technical term look up thing.
Jenny, I can't help myself but ask the historical question. Is this stylizing something which was particular to the German Academy in the 18th century, or what's with his styling? Yeah,
the style. I mean, like with like proof and exposition.
Yeah. Because it's the only thing I've read that's somewhat similar is like Spinoza or Leibniz and how they formulate their stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty typical to have like proof, exposition, especially because this was his dissertation, I think. And like one thing that it took me a little while myself to kind of notice is now I'm still sharing my screen, I guess. So I should stop doing that. But before I stop, here where he's like, what we understand by the impression or designation of spirit. Well, then spirit to us is whatever substance is purely active, immaterial, always gains understanding through itself. He's going to be focusing on, in the excerpt that we're reading, he's just focusing on like proving this explication. So proving that he has the right definition of spirit as that which is purely active. So
he's being such a good grad student.
Yeah, so actually his this kind of, if we take this out of context, it's kind of they'll be kind of thrown off by the proof, like some of these headings, but they're actually very helpful. If we were like reading the whole text, I think it would be helpful to have them. So you can see, oh, he's just giving us an exposition of this term, and he's proving that this is like the right definition of like spirit, or this is how we ought to be understanding what spirit is, and then we'll make an argument about like certain things that have to be true of spirit.
Wait, so they've been in the groups for 9.5 minutes.
Yeah, I just sent I broadcasted that they have 1 more minute.
And we have one person back. Yeah, now it's at 9:41, 9:42. Cool.
I'm really sorry. I forgot the session starts at 6. So this session is going to be posted somewhere, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally okay. Let me give you, you're free to stay in. So we just got done with the first exercise and discussion. We're going to have another exercise that you're more than welcome to participate in. Let me send you, we have a form that we're going to be using to communicate and send out that thing. I'm going to just send it in the chat right here. Let me know if you have any issues with that. Yeah, cool. We have people coming back. And I guess I'll just hand it off to Jenny as people start coming back.
Why don't we just make sure when people come back to announce again the form, which is where everything's going to be posted, and the Dropbox link, Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, Jenny.
Oh no, I was just, are we gonna have a discussion after the Dennett piece first?
Oh, right. Sorry.
Oh no, it's okay. I just wanted to make sure that we made time for that.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so people are coming back. We're still waiting. But yeah, so there is this Google form that I would really like all of you to fill out so that we, know who you are. And, well, I guess not just, that sounds weird, but like, so that we can send you documents and stuff and follow up. If you have any feedback about the workshop, we're happy to know. We're also having future workshops, so this will be really helpful. Yeah, so there's the Google form, and then also I'm gonna send the drop docs in the chat in case anyone lost the link, but I'll have Ravi take over now.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess we kind of just wanted to hear from you guys, whatever you want to express. How was this exercise for you? Do you have any thoughts about reading? So I guess if this was a philosophy class, we would be talking about the content and the claims that the author is making. But right now, I'm kind of more interested in getting people to be reflective about their reading process and reading techniques, or any kind of questions or comments they have about anything that was said so far. So if you have a question, why don't you just like either you could write the word like question or like hand in the chat, and then I can call on you. Or just like write your question if you prefer for me to like read your comment out loud. Okay, I see Cameron. Go, Cameron.
Yeah, I just had a question about like, I was sympathetic to your method that you used when you first came into philosophy. But I found that like when I have a lot of time, I don't personally mind just like staying on one paragraph for a day if I have all the time in the world, so I can figure it out before I move on. Because I fear that like if I don't understand that, I'm gonna keep reading on, and then I'm gonna be even more lost because I didn't understand that one point. And I think there is something like to be said that like you can go back to it later and maybe like get a better understanding, or like they might go over that point in better detail later on. But like, if I have an infinite amount of time, is it wrong for me to just like, or just like way too much? Is it wrong for me to like just like stick on that one thing until I get it? Because I feel like, especially with logical text, they don't give you that stuff to like figure it out later on, or they don't reiterate. They just say it, and you better get it that one time.
Okay. First of all, before I answer, I could pause the recording if people would feel more comfortable during this Q&A period to not have themselves recorded. Should I do that, or what do other people think about this? Someone just asked me in the chat if I want to do that. Hosts, should we pause the recording?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Sorry, fine to pause or fine not to pause?
I think if anybody would like you to pause, that's 100% something we should do. I do kind of think that a lot of the questions that people who might be watching later would have might coincide with the kinds of questions that people that are here would have, and I don't want to take that off of the table unless someone wants us to take that off the table.
Okay, good. Okay, so if anyone wants to, ask a question and have me pause, just let me know, and you can send me a private message. Okay, so back to Cameron's question. Cameron's question was, I think, is utilizing, am I recommending this technique only for circumstances in which you are short in time? If you had infinite amount of time, would it be better to just like read in the regular way? So I want to say two things. First, I really think it depends on the person and what's right for them. I definitely do not necessarily think that this is right for everyone. But for me, the kind of switch that I had is that I realized that you're right, Cameron. Someone like a point is going to be made in one place, and if I'm going to miss it, I'm going to miss it. But I think what I realized is sometimes I need to have a better understanding of a text as a whole. And only then I can situate the particular claims that are being made. So sometimes what I really need is to read the whole text this way for the first time. If I have infinite amount of time, or if the text is important to me, I will then reread the text again for the second time, slowly, but it will be much easier. And then those points that I couldn't understand, maybe there was a point on page 5 that I couldn't understand, but like looking back, yeah, I could never have understood it without the other point that is being made on page 10. But if I were to, stay on page 5, I would never get to page 10 and I would never understand it. Or sometimes I need to understand not anything that's said like at any particular point, but kind of like the whole narrative of the thing. So sometimes it's just useful to use this as a preliminary kind of reading and then do a second reading that's like more in depth, but then you have something to guide you. So maybe like one way to contrast this, like one way to read the text is like links in a chain, and like you need to like get every link to get to the next. That's like a one way to think about it. And that works for some people, for some purposes, for some texts. And a different way that might work in other circumstances is to kind of like see the whole and be able to say, I have gaps here, here, and here. But now at least I see my gaps and I can like go back to this gap. I'm going to start with this one. I'm going to close this gap. And then I'm going to close this gap and this gap. Yeah, so I guess that's how I'm thinking about it, that this could be the first step in a very, very thorough reading of the text. So a thorough reading is not necessarily just like going over it one by one. It really depends.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, that was really helpful. I also do want to say, like, we are going to have a general Q&A at the end. So if folks have questions like about just reading in general, maybe better for the end. But I think, yeah, if I would like to encourage questions about just your experience reading, like having in mind that you're like reading while approaching the text. And
okay, so I think Iris was next. Iris Wang.
Yes, I have a question. So I'm a freshman and first year student. So I've never encountered like this much reading. Like it's like between 2 lectures, there's one day, and then we have like 70 to 80 pages assigned. And then like English is not my first language, so I really don't know how can I finish all the readings before going to the lecture. And then I feel the pressure, if I not finish the reading, I shouldn't attend the lecture. So,
yes. Okay, I want to thank you so much for asking this question. This was me. English is also not my first language. And actually, I was using an app at one point to like see how fast I can read. And I found out that like my English reading pace is like half my pace in like my native language, which is like, oh my God, does that mean that everyone reads like twice as fast as me? Like, how will I ever be able to like go over those like amounts of reading? And I felt like I shouldn't attend maybe class if I haven't done the readings thoroughly, or even if I do attend, I should never participate. I don't have a right to participate if I haven't finished, if I haven't understood the text. That's something that's so scary. I felt those things, and it can really paralyze you. So I want to offer kind of a different way to think about this, because I think everyone has a right to come to class and to participate, no matter how well they understood the text. So the way that I'm thinking about it now, I think the way I was thinking about it before, when I just started, I thought, oh, I should like definitely understand everything well, or like to a high degree, to participate, to come. But actually, I think, now that I'm like a GSI, what I really want my students is to just like give it their best shot. Just try. And then when you come, just like ask the things that you genuinely want to know more about. So, do the best you can with the text and just like be prepared to learn. And I think something that's also helpful for me, like especially when I'm GSIing a class in, something I'm not very familiar with, I will read the text quickly, like before class once. Then I go to class, I get some more information about it, I get better oriented, and then you can go back to the text and read it again. So it's not about understanding like everything on the first read, understanding everything before class. So I think for me, it kind of helps me, especially when I have those like huge amounts of reading. If I just decide on how much time the thing is going to take me, so I decide, okay, I'm just deciding I'm going to devote 2 hours to this text because that's all I have realistically. And I'm just going to do the best I can. And it's okay to do the best you can. And then you come and you ask questions. And yeah, it's going to be scary because you're going to feel like, but I'm not completely on top of it. But that's okay. And that's actually where almost every student is. So yeah, I definitely understand you. I felt very similar things, but I encourage this different perspective that I hope you could take, because you do deserve to participate, especially if you do your best. But even if, you know, if you could like barely get through it, still you have, you know, your questions are valuable, maybe even more so.
So
Okay.
you said that you were gonna devote like 2 hours on this specific text. Like let's say if you like do you want like in-depth reading, or do you just try to, you know, get through it and then come back if you have time? Like which is the type that is like
Yeah.
most helpful?
Okay. So first, as to the time frame, I was just giving a number, 2 hours. It's going to be really individual for like each of you. How much time do you have? What are your other commitments? How much reading do you have? Just choose a time frame that makes sense for you given your life. And about what to do with the text, yes, I think you came in a bit late. So yeah, so the thing I was trying to do is kind of give a skill to how to like read for the main argument, which is like the first kind of round of reading that you could do. So what I would recommend is you could go over this handout that I have in the Dropbox, or you can watch this recording later, and you know, you can reach out to me if you want to ask more questions about that.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry for interrupting, Ravi, but I think we'll have to
Okay.
move to Jenny's portion.
Mhm.
And I think I saw somebody's hand raised for a question, but if they could save the question maybe for the end, that'd be fantastic. Sorry, Ravi.
No, thank you very much.
Okay, well, so then we'll start to turn to talking about reading historical philosophical texts. And also, I hope, I feel like the discussion we were having is something that's going to be equally as applicable here, maybe to all of your reading assignments in philosophy. So I hope these are really good questions, and I hope these are the sorts of questions we can continue to ask when we break again for Q&A. So why don't I start to share my screen with a handout that I made for this. Okay. Okay, everyone see the handout? Okay, great. So I also just want to start by saying that so many of the tips that Ravit was just going through will be equally applicable here when you're reading historical texts. The advice that Ravit gave is incredible advice, and I'm wondering, you know, my life would have been so much easier if I had gotten this advice at an earlier stage of my reading philosophy. As it was, like Ravit, I had to kind of, you know, drudge through and try to figure out some of these techniques for myself. And I think when you come out on the other end of it, you can really see that when you practice these skills, you will improve in your reading. And I think the focus that now I'm just going to focus on specifically kind of stumbling blocks or things that might be difficult, especially in historical philosophical texts. So if you can all see the handout. So let's assume you're starting in 25B or 25A, or even if you're in methods, there's a historical reading assignment this week. Okay, so you've been assigned kind of your first like historical philosophical reading. How should you approach this? Or what are some tips that might be helpful as you approach this? I have 5 basic tips. I think the first few we can go through pretty quickly, and then I want to spend a little bit more time discussing the suggestions I have for you at the end. So the very first thing that I would recommend is getting acquainted with the author that you're reading. So what historical period is the author from? Who might this author have been in dialogue with? Why are you reading this historical text or excerpt in your course? And is there anything about this author that you might have heard of before or that you find particularly interesting? If there's a writing assignment, you can sometimes, you know, go into the reading if it's the first time you're reading something with the questions of the prompt and be reading something kind of with those questions in the back of your mind. And the reason why I bring this up is because I believe that reading historical philosophical texts can sometimes feel a little bit harder to motivate sometimes. But I think if you keep your kind of general interests, maybe they're historical interests, maybe they're kind of more contemporary philosophical interests, but if you keep your kind of personal interests in mind, your questions in mind, it can help orient you when you're reading a historical philosophical text. It can help you to figure out what to be on the lookout for. It's okay to not kind of go through a historical text and come out understanding, you know, perfectly everything that was said. You can kind of go into a historical text looking for, well, where does that author talk about, you know, what ideas are, something we'll talk about with an example in a little bit, or where is that author kind of, in what section is that author introducing their argument for whatever it is that you might be interested in. Maybe you're interested in their arguments about God, that sort of thing. So it's okay to kind of focus your reading of historical text in those ways. The second tip would then be to make sure that you're always reading the correct edition or translation of a historical text. And oftentimes, what I mean by this is really, if you've been assigned a text in a course, use the assigned edition or the recommended translation. This is typically because the sorts of editions that you'll be assigned in a class are assigned to you for a number of reasons. Either it's because the translation is kind of superior to other translations, and or because there are some editions by the editor of the text. So sometimes in editions of historical texts, there will be added section headings, added or supplementary tables of contents. And these can be kind of like a life raft when you're reading a historical text. So I would always strongly recommend, if you're taking a history, a philosophy class, or you're just reading a historical text in a philosophy class, definitely don't just find like an online PDF or something. Definitely go with the assigned version of the text, the assigned edition. And if you can't get access to it, definitely contact the professor about that. They either will have like a PDF available that they could share with you, or they will point you to the correct kind of place to read that text online somewhere. So just make sure you're reading the correct translation, the right edition with all of the helpful headings and footnotes and such. That brings me naturally to this third point. If you're reading an entire book, it'll be a short book probably if you're in a class like 25B. But this is something that you do in 25B. You start by reading Descartes' entire Meditations. The very first thing you should do is look at that table of contents. Consider and kind of just get a sense of what are the major divisions of the work. Typically, the section headings will be things like, you know, on the intelligibility of sensation or something, or it'll be something that doesn't sound all that coherent. Other times they will be really coherent section headings, like my first argument for the proof of the existence of God. So sometimes they'll be helpful, sometimes they won't be helpful. So it's just good to familiarize yourself with these. It can sometimes help, it won't always help. For example, you might be reading a historical text that won't have a table of contents because it's not an essay or a book. So maybe you're reading a poem, or you've just been given kind of some excerpts from a longer book, and you know, maybe the professor didn't include the table of contents. That's okay. I would then consider, if you're kind of just breaking down the reading, thinking about kind of paragraph 1, paragraph 2, or if it's a poem, looking by line numbers. And I want to echo some of Ravit's advice from earlier. I think when you're reading a historical text, it's extremely important to annotate as you're reading. Especially, it's extremely important to kind of make sure that with the text that you've been assigned, you know kind of what's the main topic of that paragraph. Or if you could kind of say, okay, in this paragraph, what's going on? It doesn't mean you have, let's say what's going on in a paragraph is that they're introducing, maybe it's Descartes. Descartes is introducing his argument for the existence of God, his first argument. The first thing that you want to do there is then make sure that you have, let me make sure I'm also covering everything that I meant to cover. Right. Right, sorry, you want to make sure that you end or kind of summarize that paragraph with a sentence that describes what's going on in that paragraph. So like, you won't have to understand the argument, but you should just give a kind of summary note that this is what's going on in that paragraph. So you can turn back to it or know where to look or where you should dive in deeper next time when you're rereading, or you've now been given a kind of written assignment and you have a prompt to kind of guide your reading. So then fourthly, remember that part of reading historical philosophy, and also part of the joy of reading historical philosophy, is that there's a lot of interpretive puzzles. So you're reading if you're reading a philosophical text, it's meant to not only be informative, but also, you are reading a philosophical text, so it's meant to be informative. You are getting arguments for something on some topic, but remember that the information that's curated there, or the arguments that are curated there, are arguments that were curated for an audience that was alive hundreds of years ago. So as a reader today, the text is then not only informative, so you might find the arguments really convincing. They might be just as convincing today as they were 100 years ago, if you can kind of understand what they're arguing. But they're not only informative, but they're also going to be the subject of a lot of ongoing interpretive debates. So this means there will often be debates about the correct interpretation of the premises or conclusions of an argument, not just debates about whether the argument is successful or convincing. So this is just one kind of added wrinkle when you're doing historical philosophy, is that there's a lot of interpretation or interpretive puzzles that go on. So you'll get a kind of clear articulation of a definition or something, or it'll seem clear on first reading, and then there's actually a really, you'll find out that there's actually a lot of disputes about that. And if you're talking to your neighbor, or if you're in breakout rooms after you've read a historical philosophical text like we're about to do, you'll find, oh, when I read that, I thought it meant this one thing, you thought it meant this other thing. It's very common in historical texts, because just there's this gap of time, and kind of the way that we're using terms nowadays is not exactly the way they were being used before. So it's something to be on the lookout for. And so then that kind of brings us to, I think, the main point, or the main thing that I think you should focus on when you're reading historical texts in philosophy. So be prepared for kind of seemingly ordinary or familiar terms to be used in unconventional or kind of special technical ways. So, and when we say that a word has a technical meaning for a given philosopher, what that means is that they've imbued a term, often a familiar word, with a new or special meaning when used within the context of just their philosophical system. So, for example, the word accident, that sounds to our ears like the word for mistake or mishap, whereas for many early modern writers, they use it kind of interchangeably with the word property or quality, and they'll say that those are the properties or qualities of substances very often. So it's just something to be on the lookout for, that kind of seemingly ordinary or familiar terms could be being used or employed in a special or technical way. Or another example, the word intuition to our ears can seem like the word instinct, or kind of it means like natural inclination. So if you have an intuition about something, it seems like, oh, like kind of just like naturally plausible or something to you. Someone like Kant is going to attach a technical meaning to this term. He's going to use it to mean like a sense datum or a sense representation. And so you're not expected to already know this, of course, that there are these kinds of special meanings of words being used that otherwise might seem familiar to you. However, you should be prepared to identify and ask questions about them. These are exactly the sorts of questions you should be asking in your in a 25B type class or a 25A type class. He uses this term, but I don't really know what he means by it. He defines it like this. Sometimes the definitions aren't even all that helpful. So it's definitely something to just know that you'll have to kind of work on, and just look. I think the main thing is also to work on just kind of spotting when these technical terms are being introduced, because they end up being kind of the fodder for all of the interpretive debates that end up going on when we're doing historical philosophy. When in doubt, circle or highlight the uses of terms that don't seem to fit the ordinary meanings of the words, and then ask about them, of course. And when you're on your own, practice seeing if you can figure out what the special or technical meaning of a word might be from context. You might also be given a technical definition up front. We're going to look at some texts where that's the case. So read these carefully. And then once defined, also expect other instances of that word to carry this technical meaning. And if you don't understand kind of how it's being defined, that's okay. And again, that's the perfect sort of question that you could bring to lecture that you could ask in a setting like this as well. Kind of critical reading tip, be on the lookout for whether the author is using a technical definition consistently. You might say, okay, we're about to look at an example where this might be the case, where there might be an inconsistent use. But you might say, okay, or Descartes might say, I'm defining ideas as the images of things or something like this. And then he might give as an example an idea that you can't imagine being something like an image. So just be on the lookout for this sort of if an author has given you a technical definition, look out for whether they give you examples, look out for kind of, are they using it consistently in each case? Have I kind of really understood what this means? And it's absolutely and actually completely okay and to be expected that you and whoever you're discussing this with, maybe someone else in your class, that you might debate over the meanings of these words and how they're being used. And oftentimes, the way that we sometimes interpret these terms is like, well, what's the way that what's the best way for me to interpret this term so that it seems like they're being consistent in their overall argument, or it seems like they're using this term, they could be using this term consistently. So there's a lot of kind of work that will go into understanding these terms, and the best thing that you can do if you're just starting out reading historical philosophy is be on the lookout for where these terms are being introduced, and especially if it seems like they're playing a role in the argument. So very briefly, we'll look at this before we turn to Amo. I guess I've lost a little bit track of time.
Yeah, we're a little short. I'm not sure if.
Yeah, okay, then we don't have to look.
It.
Yeah, maybe I think this handout is now in the Dropbox, so you could kind of look at this passage. The highlighted part is where Descartes is introducing the technical definition of the word idea. But again, it's more complicated than it might first appear. So take a look at that on your own, and if there are questions, you could always, I have these questions here, you could always email me. So with that in mind, I think either Jonah wanted to make some comments about historical reading as well, and then we could turn to our example, or is that still happening? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I can do it really briefly, especially since it pertains to one of the questions, both questions that were asked both by Cameron and Iris. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. So the biggest thing that I want to emphasize is this is what the first time I read a historical text, what it looks like, is it's just very bare bones, underlining, bracketing, circling of keywords. You can see at the bottom there, I saw the word pure and was like, this is very odd. So I circled it. And that this is what a first read will look like for me, just for me to emphasize to myself as I'm reading what's important. And this is what a final, like a third revisit will look like for me, is you can see I have like 3 colors of ink in there. I've made notes to myself. I have every key term circled. I've gone a little crazy, but this is just to illustrate that at least my experience with this historical texts, and this is Hegel as well, which winds up being particularly challenging, but you should never find yourself feeling pressure to understand the text at a particularly deep level the first time you read it, especially because my biggest experience, and this is something Jenny kind of hit on, is that the key terms that these thinkers are working with become clear through usage, usually by the end of the text, not at the beginning of it, has been my experience. And the best thing that I've done for myself in reading these historical texts has been finding secondary sources that, towards Jenny's point of like coming prepared, knowing the author a little bit, is like when I knew I was going to take Hegel with Andrea Novakovic, I like did some snooping around and I found that there was a Hegel scholar who had written a glossary of all of Hegel's key terms. And I was like, fantastic. I am going to print this out and tape it to my desk while I read. And that, like, whatever you can do to give yourself a leg up, at least on an initial understanding, do it. Because these texts are notoriously difficult and people will make their careers out of interpreting them. So if you find yourself struggling, just to speak towards Cameron's point in particular, it often is best, even if I have all the time in the world, to just read a paragraph and go, I have no idea what was happening here. Write a question mark next to the paragraph and move on, knowing that, especially in the environment of Cal, I have a specialist who I can, either at the GSI or the professor, I can go, I have no idea what was happening in the first paragraph of wrong in section 3. So take full advantage of your resources. That's it. Just a little addendum to Jenny's wonderful presentation from the undergrad perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Jonah. I think that that's everything that you just said. I would just, underline if I were reading it. Very helpful advice. Okay, so we're now going to turn to reading a historical text by a philosopher, Amo. So I wanted to actually, before we send you into breakout rooms again to read this text, I just want to give a little bit of a setup give you a little bit of the historical background of Amo and give you a sense of what to expect, just because that's something you might need going into this text a bit. And it's also, I think, it overlaps with some of the goals of MAP. So let me just pull up, I have a biography that I wanted to pull up. Okay. It's document. Oh, it's just the document I was on before. Sorry. Okay. So hopefully I'm sharing my screen again. Okay. So so we're going to be reading an excerpt from Amo's On the Absence of Sensation in the Human Mind. So this is a dissertation written by Amo that was published in 1734. So Amo is an African philosopher working within what we would call the early modern period of the history of philosophy. So that's roughly the 17th to 18th centuries is the time period. So Amo is writing smack dab in the middle of what we would call the early modern period. We're reading an excerpt from his doctoral dissertation given at the University of Wittenberg in Germany. It was published and defended in 1734. Before I say a little bit more about the kind of philosophical kind of points of note, just as a bit of more biography on Amo. So Amo, he was born in Ghana in 1703. He was brought into a noble family in Amsterdam. So he moved to Europe. He was brought to Europe when he was around 4 years old, they think, but there's very little historical record to know what in fact happened. But he was basically adopted into a noble family, and the kind of pretext of his adoption, as it's sometimes described in biographical literature, it's not clear actually if he was purchased as a slave, or if he was in fact adopted. He was living with a noble family in Holland, and he was basically kind of raised by them as a son, in the sense that he had an education like anyone else would have had at the time. And it's extremely just notable for the time because Holland, or the Dutch Republic, had started in the slave trade in like the 1660s. And so it is very highly possible that he might have entered the country because he was purchased as a slave by the family, that nevertheless he received an education. But what's most remarkable about Amo is kind of despite these circumstances, he published and defended his dissertation that we're about to read an excerpt from in 1734. And also throughout, and he then soon after became a professor for about 2 decades at the University of Vienna in Germany. But he also lectured at a number of other universities in Germany throughout that time period. He gave lectures in, I think, 7 different languages, and he lectured not only on philosophy, but also astronomy, medicine, mathematics. He was basically a kind of like a Renaissance man. He was adept at a lot of different subjects. However, later in his career, so around 1753, he had been a professor at that point for 2 decades. But there was growing resentments and racist tensions in Germany at the time. And so he, for his own safety, actually fled and moved back to Ghana. So this is after having this like extremely storied academic career in Europe for the last, I think he was in his 50s when he moved back to Ghana. So it's just interesting context to know. And so then, getting back into just what to kind of prepare you for what you're about to read. So we are reading an excerpt from his inaugural, from his dissertation where he defended and received his doctoral degree. And so in this dissertation, he is critiquing several of Descartes' arguments in the Meditations, particularly the view that sensation can be a kind of thought. So that's something to just be aware of. It's okay if you don't exactly know what that means, but it might be helpful context. And many have taken AMO to be advancing materialism, that the only substance is physical body, and rejecting dualism, the view that there are two types of substances, mind and body. However, now that this dissertation, which was originally written in Latin, has become more widely translated, there's a lot of people who are kind of chiming in and disagreeing with this traditional interpretation of AMO. I happen to be one of those people. So just know that what you're reading is something that hasn't been widely available in English translation. It's really only become available in the last year. So that's, I think, really interesting to know as well. And it's kind of exciting that you're kind of getting to do some real interpretive work on this text, because there is still just a lot of ongoing debate because it hasn't been widely circulated in translation in English before. So yeah, so some questions to orient you as you're reading. What technical definitions, if any, is AMO introducing in this article? What is or are the conclusions being argued for in this text? And then lastly, where are the arguments located in the text? You're going to read, if you have the AMO PDF up now, you're going to be reading on to kind of basically the first page and a half. So you'll stop on page 2 right before exposition 2. So read up through proof 2. You'll see all sorts of section headings in the article. So just note those, be on the lookout. But that's, I think, so should we do breakout rooms now? Whoever is able to do that.
Okay, so I will divide us into breakout rooms. So it's going to be the same as before. The co-host, you will be automatically sent to breakout rooms. So just leave them and come back here. And okay, I'm going to do 4 or 5 people in each room. Okay. So I'm going to open the rooms now.
AMO's lit, dude.
Yeah, and you said this was like recently or like pretty recently? It's like there's been like growing scholarship on him.
I mean, Jenny would have the answer to that. I don't know.
Okay.
But
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Oh, I was just wondering if I recall. I think you said something about like the scholarship on him has just been kind of like a recent thing, like people or.
Oh, on who?
On AMO.
Yes, it's very recent. Yeah, there's a so just if you're interested, the translation that you were reading that was used just now for this session that we used in 25B over the summer was published in like kind of just a broader anthology of historical texts, but it was only published in 2019. There was I think Oxford's publishing, or just published this summer, a much more official and almost specific anthology of just like almost texts and his various essays. And I think you can purchase it now. So yeah, so it's super new out there in English.
Thanks. I'll definitely check it out.
Cool.
Okay, so I'm glad we have people back. Yeah, this workshop has taken longer than we anticipated. So thanks for those who stayed. So I'm just gonna kind of recap some of the things we talked about. If you need to leave, that's totally okay. It's 8. But if you want to stay, we're gonna do a Q&A. And in any case, yeah, the recording is going to be made available to you, as well as all of the resources that we've used. So just to recap what we did today, this was a reading workshop. Our goal, or at least, yeah, a part of our goal was to help people to be reflective about their reading skills, because reading is actually something that you can, improve on. We're not born readers. Everyone should feel free to participate in their class, no matter to what degree they understand the text. You should not expect yourselves to understand every single thing in the text. It's never going to happen. No expert understands everything in a text. It is good to have some kind of a grasp before you get into class, and the kind of skills that we've been talking about are the kind of skills that can help you have this kind of preliminary grasp that you can have before you go into lecture, before you go into section. It's a beginning point. So I was talking about reading for the main argument in the text, going into the text, really searching for those things that are going to help you understand the bigger picture. I was talking from my perspective as contemporary texts in philosophy. Jenny was speaking from the perspective of reading historical texts. There are a lot of things in common. Some of the things that Jenny emphasized is really noticing those technical terms. You don't have to necessarily understand what they mean, but it's good to notice them, because then you can ask about them. She was also talking about contextualizing what you're reading. Know the period, know who the author is, what the background is, know what is the thing you're supposed to be reading about. Is it a critique of Descartes? Like what is the thing? What is the job of each paragraph? So those were kind of some of the overall themes that we've been talking about, and we kind of wanted to open it to Q&A, and I think Paul wanted to add some things.
Yes, I'm sorry, my laptop's gonna die. Well, it won't, I'll save it. But yeah, so yeah, thank you all so much for coming. I know it's really late. I know California's on fire and we're in a pandemic. Oh, I forgot to mention, I made a mistake, and in the Google form I asked everyone to fill out, we didn't have your email. So yeah, please fill that out. I'll post it again in the chat, or if someone else can do it, that'd be really great. Yeah, just a reminder, this was held by MAP, Minorities and Philosophy, and Peer Tutoring Program, which I run. We will send more resources out in the future. We're also going to have a writing workshop, on just writing philosophy in general. But if you have any questions about reading, writing philosophy, or anything really, please come to the tutors. I'm planning to open up the waiting list very soon, but you can always email me. So yeah, I want to open it up to, I guess, just questions that y'all have about anything. But yeah, let me know.
Sorry, a quick question. Where can we find like the tutor? Like how can we get a tutoring session again? I'm so sorry.
I'll put the link in the chat right now, Iris.
Yeah.
For where you're gonna look on the philosophy website.
Yeah, it's if you just go on the philosophy department's website, it's sorry, I'm just plugging in my laptop. It's if you click undergraduates and then peer tutors or peer tutoring, then there's a link for a sign-up sheet. It's first come, first serve. We do one-on-one tutoring for anyone enrolled in any philosophy class. And we can also just talk about stuff.
Yeah, I would love to hear how this experience was like for you. This is the first time I'm doing something like this, and I'm curious what worked well, what could be improved. So any comment you want to make would be super welcome.
We also understand that
it was beneficial to kind of go over some things that I've kind of maybe forgotten or slacked on, or like ideas that I could use that have kind of been in the back of my head, but I was like, oh yeah, I should just do that stuff. I'm someone that kind of likes to have a notebook next to myself and like write as I'm reading. But I find that sometimes I write so much that it's hard for me to summarize at the end. So I think I'm going to take you up on the tip of trying to just like quickly summarize a paragraph or something after I'm done.
Yeah,
with the reading.
you know, I was like that too. And there's a really common reading advice that people say write notes as you read, write your questions. I personally find it distracting. And I find that it makes my reading take way too long because like I get into this like thinking thread. So that, yeah, that's why I had to like switch to, no, I'm just gonna like do it at the end. Maybe I'll make a mark, like go back to this thing. But like I can't, it's like too much.
Exactly. Well, and
Yeah.
I'm just getting used to this big reading load, so maybe it might become too much for me or something. That's what I might be worried about. You know?
So as a slightly different take on the same answer is it depends what you're reading for. Is if I'm just reading for an assigned reading, I am not taking notes on the side. I'm just like doing my bracketing, doing my circling, getting it done. But like I'm working on my writing sample right now, and like a lot of the texts I'm reading for like I'm looking for specific things. So as I'm reading, I have a Google Doc open that's like page 23, she says this thing, come back to this. Page 94, Bernard Williams says this thing, come back to it. But that's like useful when you're particularly already having something in mind you're looking for in a text, not necessarily, but like I would double down on Ravit's suggestion to just like get the reading over with, and like you can always come back and add more depth.
Yeah, I
That's
guess
more
it's,
for like if you have a prompt that you've been assigned and you want to go back to Descartes' meditations to find out what is his argument for the existence of God.
yeah, I guess I would say, yeah, so like the reading technique that I've suggested is for that like preliminary reading. But, you know, I find that if you annotate the text really well, then you get the prompt, then you know where to go in the text and look. And you don't have to like read the whole thing because you have the map of the text and you're like, ah, I want more information on argument X. You know where it is now. And if you forget the definitions, it's so easy to find because it's in blue. Yeah, that was the definition of that thing.
Right on. Yeah, thank you. I'll take on this advice, and yeah, thank you very much.
I also do want to comment on this thing that was one of the big like kind of shifts or changes that I noticed when I got here, and the like methods and stuff, is I was kind of shocked at like how much of the actual work of philosophy is done stepping away from the text. And I think we have a tendency to spend all of our time trying to close read and highlight and annotate and everything. And there's a shocking amount of value in like just getting the basics and getting acquainted with it. And then like stepping away is where a ton of the insight about a text happens. And so like when you've got a huge reading load, you know, you've got 80 pages that you need to read by tomorrow. If you're trying to close read all of that, it's going to take you all day, and you're not going to have any time to back out of the text and reflect on it at all.
And just to add on to that as well, because I'm Mr. Addendum today, no original answers. That stepping back can be like, I've been on a walk and suddenly what the text meant occurred to me, or it's also been like, I stepped away from the text, I'm like, I have no idea what Aristotle said here. And then I run into someone, or I make a call, or I'm chatting, or I'm sending a meme to someone on Instagram. And then I'm like, by the way, Jeremy, did you understand what Aristotle's function argument was? And we wind up chatting about it. And like, it's much more like that chat winds up being more productive than like hours wasted away, like trying to figure out one passage of Aristotle.
Yeah, I was definitely going to say, yeah, read it and take a walk could be very beneficial.
Yeah, and just to tack on really briefly to that, you know, one thing that I usually do is whenever I'm reading something that it's kind of like particularly like I don't know, maybe complicated to me, just in that setting of reading, is to try and explain it to someone who's not a philosopher, not a philosophy student, fellow classmate. You know, it could be like you know, a partner or a friend, or like a housemate that doesn't do philosophy. And usually that's like when it becomes apparent to me that I don't understand something, is when I'm having trouble explaining it, or like, you know, like the gaps in you know, you might have like the beginning and the end of some sort of argument down, but then you kind of realize, like, as you're stumbling trying to explain it, that there are gaps. And for me, that's always been like the best way to like test myself whether you know, I've really understood something. Like, can I bring it down to a very like colloquial kind of level with somebody who's not really into philosophy, right? And I mean, you know, there might be some things in philosophy that are just like too ridiculous to put into plain English, but presumably a lot of the stuff, most of the stuff you'll read should make sense to anybody. And that, you know, that might be a little difficult, but anyway, that's just something that I usually do. That's always kind of helped me in trying to, you know, boost my confidence as to like whether or not I'm really understanding something.
Yeah, right on. Very much from Alcibiades, like the whole, like, if you can't explain it, if you can't say it to someone, you don't know it. So yeah, I try to do that with my girlfriend quite a bit, and she gets annoyed with me a lot, but it's helping me.
Yeah. Yep. No, I think it's really helpful. Yeah.
Did anyone
Thank
else
you
have
all.
any more? Oh, sorry, David. Did anyone else have
I
any
just
more
wanted to
questions?
thank you. I just thanks everyone. Yeah. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night, David.
Hey, thank you.
Anyone else have any more questions? I want to make.
Yeah. So my question is specifically for Rabbit. Like, you said English is not your first language, and then like I have the same problem. So I'm just wondering, like, what are you doing? Because, you know, I said that it would take me like an hour to read 4 or 5 pages of like English reading, and then I was just wondering what you're doing, and then like tips maybe.
Yeah, so that sounds like a very normal pace, by the way. I think when I started grad school, which means like I already did like a bunch of classes, my pace was at best 6 pages an hour, and I don't think that's unusual. So first of all, don't think there's anything wrong with you at all. One thing that I did, I mean, I think for a while there, I was using this app that really helped me because I realized, so I've been reading about this, well, like what influences reading speed. And one thing that people say that is influencing it is that we're trying to kind of like say the words in our minds, but actually saying them makes it more slow. And that made a lot of sense to me because speaking in English is even slower because like I have to figure out how to pronounce things, and like I don't really know to this day, and I will never be able to pronounce certain things. So I was using this app. You can find like a bunch of them, like they're like apps for speed reading, and it taught me, and I did improve because it teaches you how to better like read words without trying to pronounce it in your head. And I think it did help me a bit. And that's how I found out about like my reading pace, because like when I was doing it in English versus like in my native language, I could literally do it like twice as fast. So that's how I found out. And I was like, oh my God. But I also improved my English speed. I was doing that for a while. So I was using it not for philosophy papers necessarily, but for like news items or things. You know, I'd be like on my phone. Let me like use this app to read, and it helped me. I also, yeah, for me, like another source of discomfort is like words I don't know. There are still so many words I don't know. I feel so dumb all the time. But it's okay. It's okay if you don't know them. You do not have to go and search for each one of those words because it can just be too much. Be discerning, like choose what you're going to look up. It's okay. I mean, like you saw, like my approach in, when you are going to do a preliminary read, it's okay to skim. So be discerning about like which words you're going to get and which words you're going to be like, well, that's for a different day. Is it helpful at all? I don't know. How is it like for you?
I tried to like read without like the voice speaking out in my head, but when I do that, I feel like it's harder to comprehend the material. Like I definitely get through it faster, but like I feel like nothing like really stays inside my head, and then like when the professor asks, I'm like, what?
Yeah, okay. So I have 2 thoughts on that. First, I would not have been able to do this without my active reading if I weren't like annotating and stuff. And most importantly, taking notes at the end, because I can like read a paper and forget like the minute after, but then before class, I will look at my notes again. Also, because of my highlights, whenever, you know, a term is going to be used, I can so quickly go back to that because I will have highlighted in blue and I will search for the blue things and I'm like, ah, yes, the definition, and it will come back to me. So it's about, yeah, the like, if for me, the active reading is the thing that's going to make it stay in my mind. But it also reminded me of another technique that I was using for like 2 years, and I think it helped me. I was using softwares that are going to read the thing out loud to you. So I would be listening as I was also like reading. So when it comes like through different senses, you know, the sight and hearing, it actually made it better. It helped me read kind of more quickly and also like not get stuck on things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
keep like, yeah, if you have like more questions, like keep them coming.
yeah, that's like kind of the way I use like my Mac to like read it back to me, and then I try to go through it. Yeah, that's the way I'm using. But somehow like philosophy is just like I don't know if it's a sentence structure or something. Like one sentence, like I know every single word, but I just don't know what it means, like in a sentence.
Because
And
they use it differently than you're used to.
and then I have to reread it like 4 times to get one sentence, and it's just annoying.
That is normal. You will get better with practice. And I think, yeah. So I think for me also another thing, I never know where I feel like I fall short in so many ways. And I don't know sometimes if this is because this is not my native language or is this like a normal philosophy experience. It can be really difficult to tell the difference. And for me, I always like blame my lack of background, like, I'm not good at this because it's like, you know, and then I feel like I have no, you know, it's impossible. Like, this will never be my native language. Like, what can I do? Right. And it makes me feel really inadequate. But the kind of experiences that you're describing, I think every student, like, I struggle with these things still. So yeah.
Yeah, if I can just chime in on that real quick, as a native speaker, you know, a lot of the texts that I work with are literally indecipherable at the first read, even as a native speaker. And like, need to be not like, it's not just that they were like translated from German into English, they need to be translated from English into another English in order for me to understand what's going on. So that's like a ground level problem in just like reading philosophy. So I wouldn't feel overly bad that you're struggling with that, especially if like you're taking 12A or 20, like if you're taking 25A or 25B, where it's like they are not using language the way we use language.
Yeah, I do think like I do want to acknowledge like the special difficulty that comes, especially when your native language is not within the same family of languages. Because I did study German for a while, which is like in the same family of languages as English. And the difference between English and German is not as big as differences between, you know, like English and I don't know what this name is, like Latin languages, whatever it's called. If you compare it to like a you know, like it's just a completely different world.
Yeah, so, like Chinese is my native language, and then we don't even have verb tenses.
You don't start. Yeah. What did you say? You don't have what?
We don't have like any verb tense. We just use like daytime to indicate what time it happened. Mm-hmm. So we don't have like any past tense stuff, and then like.
Yeah, it's interesting you should mention about the tenses, because that's actually something that's really difficult for me too, because yeah, my native language is Hebrew. There are like 4 tenses: past, present, future, and imperative. That's it. So I get like really, I to this day do not know how to use all the different kinds of pasts and presents, like whatever. Present, I don't know the distinctions. It's so confusing.
Yeah,
like, I don't see why you need more than one past. So confusing.
Yeah, when I write, like my tense is always like mixed up. Like I use past here and I use present there, and then yeah.
It is very confusing, yes. But you can learn this. You will learn this. It is a matter of practice. And also, actually, for me, this is like a tip I just discovered like last year. this is kind of embarrassing, but I'm going to share it with everyone, even though I'm recorded. You study this language, you know this language, you know it really well. Like I hear you speaking, you are fluent, you're excellent. For me, I always felt like I'm at a disadvantage because like I was taught this language, but not in the same way. Not, I was taught it as a second language. It's different. Like I didn't have like those same English classes that everyone around me had. I started writing philosophy papers like a year before I joined, like in my late 20s, starting to write in English. And I felt like, man, this is hopeless. I will never get this. But then I was like, wait a minute, I feel insecure because other people have learned this in a different way. I can just teach myself in the same way that they were taught if I just find the right books. And I did. I'll just like learn all like the tips that they get in high school. I will read about them. I can do this. And you can do it too. It's just like learning something and you can do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm trying to find some time to teach myself, but it's like always I'm procrastinating.
Let me recommend to you a book in the chat because this book changed my life and it's super. Okay. Let me show you this book that changed my life.
Okay.
This book. Mm-hmm. I see it's reversing it. This book is super famous in the US. I just got acquainted with it recently. Yeah, do you know it?
Yeah, you have two in the.
It's called The Elements of Style. And I was like, this is what they teach them. I should just read it myself because this is what they are taught. It like dawned on me, like I know books are used to teach them in high schools. I should just get a hold of one of those and then I will know what they know.
Element?
It's called The Elements of Style. It's by William Strunk. And it's actually, you see, it's pretty thin, and it's actually even thinner than this because like half of it is like the original and half is by someone else. Whatever, I don't need that someone else. I just need just stuff that this strong guy did. And it's made a lot of sense to me, both in reading like things like tenses, like yes. There was a brief moment in which I actually understood the different kinds of pasts. That moment is best, but I did understand it for a minute.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, and so and like especially like in writing, and then like also you see that some of the mistakes that you're making are actually pretty common even for native speakers, and it makes you feel like better. Like I make this mistake, but actually it's pretty common even for natives.
Okay, and can you also recommend the app that you use for like speed reading?
I don't remember the name of this app. I don't have it anymore. I don't remember.
Maybe in a later email, like you can.
I don't have it because I changed laptops, but it's not. You can use any of them. Just search. Yeah, I like at the time I just like downloaded like the 3 top apps and chose my favorite one.
Okay.
Can I also just say this is a little bit different, but what we were talking about earlier, like I mentioned this in the beginning, like it's totally fine to not read quickly. Like I can maybe read 10 pages an hour, but it really depends on what I'm reading. And if I'm reading Kant, it can be as little as like 1 page an hour. And then even then I still won't really get it. So don't worry too much about having to read quickly. Some professors will assign a lot of reading.
Yeah.
I won't name names while we're recorded, but yeah, we'll find a lot. But that doesn't, like, sometimes there's just too much to read, and you can sort of pick the sections that you have to write about or talk about, and just skim through other parts. I know there are GSIs in here, but I mean, this is something that all undergrads do. But yeah, I mean, and then I actually I can't even read very much in a day and for very long. I noticed that if I think after about 20 pages or so, I get really burnt out.
Yeah.
In a day. And
nothing sticks anymore.
Yeah. So like it's really difficult stuff. So it's totally fine if you can't read it quickly. People who can, like there are like, maybe like 1 out of 100 people who can just like get through like 100 pages of really dense stuff every day, but most of us aren't them, and that's totally
As one of those people, and it's not 100 pages, it'll be like, oh, I'll do like 40 or 50 pages comfortably. It still is like, oh, if I'm reading a contemporary author, it's like 40 or 50 pages and it's like really navigable. Again, like going back to Kant or going back to like even Husserl or Aristotle or any of these more complex writers, it's like everything slows down.
Although I do want to say that I have been reading those historical texts. I've been trying like the same methods on the historical texts. And again, this is not from my research. This has been in classes that I've GSI'd, and I just like need to like, and I kind of found it helpful too. Again, because I want to come into class prepared, and the instructor can assign like 50 pages of Locke. What am I gonna do? I can't. So I'll just go over it quickly. I come into class. I kind of know what's up, not in depth though. But then in class, I will find out what are the things that are important to us in the context of the class. And I can revisit those sections later after I know the general picture because I skimmed the whole thing and I've been to class and I paid attention. Yeah.
Also, I do want to say, like, I know this probably got mentioned somewhere, and like, I don't even think it's a faux pas amongst GSIs. I know Ravit's told me this flat out. Jenny, I don't know if you're on the same page, but like, you don't have to read everything.
Oh yeah, let me just verbally say you don't have to read everything. Like I agree with that completely.
Yeah, pick and choose. Be picky. If there's like, oh, we're gonna have a midterm on like, it's going to be 6 questions about these several authors, and you only need to answer 3 of those questions, and 2 of them can be on the same author. Read the author that you're going to answer 2 questions about really well, and find another author that you kind of vibe with and read them. But then like the other 2 authors, like, yeah, if you got time, read them, great. But like, if you don't, if it's that or lose something else in some other class, read what you need to write your midterm questions, and then move on to what your next class that you need to make the same choice about.
Okay. Yeah, just I don't know. Maybe it's because it's my first year. I just feel the pressure that I need to read every single thing and then like understand every single thing.
Yeah, I want to comment on that. I have this feeling too still. You do not have to read every single thing. And I don't know if it's going to help you, but for me, it kind of helps to kind of put this in the context of gender expectations, because I think I have internalized some kind of like higher standards for myself.
Yeah.
But if you actually look at this, like listen to the students, listen to their questions. Mm-hmm. Not all of them have read everything, and it is totally okay. So, I think it is something that women do tend to do sometimes, put like really, really high standards for yourself. And it helps me when like I remind myself, oh, this is like a social norm that's actually harmful and I've internalized it. So I need to push back against it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. I'll try to not push too much on my burden on myself, I guess. I'm actually not a philosophy major. Like I'm just taking a class in like Phil's 3, I think, the nature of mind, and so like one problem that I noticed for the readings is that like I could like read. It's like the professor wrote the book, so it wasn't like any hard like past English or anything like that, but I would understand the point that he's arguing, but I don't understand his reasoning towards the point. So it's like I know, hey, he's trying to argue that like for consciousness, like human can't really I don't know how to say it, like humans can't really try to tell if others are conscious or not because they're too closely related to other person. But like I don't understand his reasoning towards that point, and especially because I'm like a psych major, and then like this whole argument is just like against like kind of my belief in a certain certain degree.
I'm muted. Also, yeah, bye, Jonah. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm totally down to stay on.
Okay, so I'm gonna make you Paul the host so that I could
Cool. I forget what I was saying.
okay, so I'm just gonna say nice seeing everyone.
Thank you so much.
I want to say thank you so much, Ravi. None of this would have happened without chance Zoom call.
Actually, none of this would have happened without you, Jeremy.
That's true, but it's like a link in the chain. I'm not like, you know, the origin. I'm not the mover, just like part of the causal nexus after the fact.
I would say we had a fruitful collaboration.
That is true. I'll grant you that.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Yes, good night.